Are we back? We had people on. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. If you were watching, thank you. If you were watching the last one, we're on to a new one. I don't know why it cut out. We'll see what happens. So, hi. So, my strategy for, this is part 2. A continuation. Thank you for all of those who came back. The strategy now for the for that site is I'm not going to try and get it. At the time I was trying to get it, the person that I needed to who was able to bridge the earth and also the higher dimension, that person, we didn't connect or whatever. I couldn't manage to get my energy to function where it needed to function. And we also had a tremendous amount of dark attacks. So the strategy for that property has changed, and then I'll tell you why it matters to us now, because it does. Because everything is geometrical, and I don't have my jurisdiction of energy is the part that is in the higher portion of the triangle, and the school's energy was down here in the point of the triangle. So it's kind of like there's only so far I could go down. So energy takes the path of least resistance. So it's easier for me, believe it or not, to go up, go broad, go big. And it's kind of like if the school is if a school is this thing, this is the location. Oh, let's say the school is the middle, and the dark forces have it surrounded because they really want it, and I can't reach it, but I can go broad. What I can do is go over here and kind of come down on top of it and surround the surrounders. It's actually easier for me to liberate the entire planet, lift up everything energetically, and affect it from the outside in. So that's the strategy now, and I don't mind telling you because that's what's going to happen, so they should know if they don't. Fuck you. It's good-natured combativeness. It's not really combativeness. I don't really do that. And they're only the other side of us anyway. I still think we're going to get it. I still want it. So the reason that the energetics of the events during the 100 Years War, the dynamics of the groups were such that it's as though it was really the 100 Years War in France was really very much a three-way battle because and this is why it went on for so freaking long, and it was really, really difficult because there was just the tension, because not only when you think about it, enough people know that it was about, you know, the French and the English. And when Joan of Arc landed, it was about driving the mission. The overall mission was to drive the English out and preserve France. But what's less well known is that during that time, France was already in a civil war as well. So it's kind of like, in fact, it's exactly what it is. It's like one country that's fighting, like if the United States was fighting both the Revolutionary War because they wanted their liberation, but they were also fighting the Civil War. And those that were in the French that were locked in Paris, within the walls of Paris, a lot of them actually didn't want to be liberated. It's like, we're held by English, but we vote we'll just go be English. It's like, why don't they just take us? So, and I can promise you that it is that dynamic that I had to personally face in this lifetime as well. And So the way it affects the collective, because we are like group consciousness reincarnates too. We incarnate as individuals with small groups. We incarnate with larger groups too. And it's very much the same thing now, where one of the main challenges, same freaking problem, it's the same problem, is that so all of us, the light warriors, all of the star seeds, etc., we've descended, we have descended on planet Earth to liberate the prison planet, right? And because they're locked in the third dimensional construct, and they want as many of them, the sleepers, they liked it that way, they want to stay. So part of the problem is like trying to rescue somebody, and you go in to rescue them and they're just fighting you with arrows, and you're getting all kinds of crap because they don't know that it's better where they're going, or they don't think it's better. They like it the way it is. They want their tradition. They want to buckle down, and they don't want to be liberated. It's like the Union soldiers going in and say, "Don't worry, we're here to bring you back into the Union. Don't worry, we came to get you." And they're like, "Fuck you, we're trying to secede, let us alone." That's exactly what it's like. So all of you, I'm sure if you're watching this live stream, you're one of the awakened people, and you probably have a personal history of like being the awakened one in a crowd of people who are asleep, or your families, and you try to wake them up and they want to stay. So in this way, the Joan of Arc template has spread out, and all of the people there picked it up, and we've all had to fight various personal versions of this same freaking dynamic. So, going through this, there is actually a long-term strategy in place. There's been I'm not going to go into it this time, because what I really want to talk about is the commencement, the creation of the new. But it's a knowledge of the dynamics of the past. It's helpful to have a certain fundamental understanding of the dynamics. The 100 Years' War is an easy thing to look at and kind of point to in a chart and say, we can use this as an example of what happened, because sometimes if you try to, and you can apply it to the way the current political and global, the way things are now. And then it feels a little bit, you can take a step back and maybe not be quite so personally attached to it, she said. So, can you see I have a thing about seeing color. I don't want you guys to see color. I know you've seen cutlery. I just don't like it. I don't like it. Light transmission, I want it to be, I'm going to move that. For my own peace of mind. I don't know why it bugs me so much. Oh, that's not true, I do. Okay. So going forward, those of us who have crossed today, this very day, Thanks to Dave Yellen, we just went through this. He was able to act as the counterpart with me, and we formed 2 columns. And the energetics of this, so if you didn't catch that one, you should go back and catch that one for sure. There's a tremendous amount of orchestration going on. So I do need to talk about creation in the 5th dimension is different than creating in the 3rd. Creating in the 3rd dimension it's it's more a matter of channeling, and it's a little bit like creating with something that's already made. The 3rd dimension is all about responding to things, and your actual creative ability is limited to that. How you respond to things. And that serves a protective capacity so that you can only do so much damage when you're in a position of ignorance. When you're surrounded by density, basically when you're surrounded by density and you're in a position of spiritual ignorance for a lot of people, the vast majority of people, particularly historically, have been in a position of relative spiritual immaturity. And as such, you can't let them have too much creative ability. The same way you don't want physical babies to have babies prematurely. It's a poor idea. They need to be physically mature before, and preferably spiritually wise too, before you take responsibility for bringing something additional into the world. But the principles are the same. And in the 5th dimension, you learn just how true that is. It is true, as above, so below. The same way, if you have a baby, you need to take care of the baby. And as a parent, you're responsible for, pretty much, you're responsible for what your kid does. You know, they break a window with throwing a baseball, you're the one who's got to have to pay for it. You're the one who has to take responsibility for both them and their well-being, and also for, to a certain degree, to a large degree, you're responsible for any havoc they create. So in the 5th dimension, we're entering into a place of spiritual maturity where we are responsible for everything that we create. So that really, it takes us into a whole new realm of thinking. There's a whole new array, a vast array of considerations that must be taken into account. Hence the requirement for spiritual wisdom on the other side of this gateway. The twin flame gateway is where you meet another as yourself, so that you understand. I've said this before, but just to recap very quickly, when we're in the 3rd dimension, we experience separation, and we are responsible mostly for ourselves and for our immediate, our physical family. And it's our job in the 3rd dimension and in the fourth dimension, to balance the masculine and feminine aspects of ourselves so that we can learn to create. And we learn, you know, about the law of attraction. We learn about balance, and we learn how to balance ourselves. So the 11 gateway and the whole twin flame grid is based on the principle that before you can become part of a multiplicity, part of a group of people, the initial stage of that is that you have one other individual with whom you share a mission for a specific task, and it needs to be another balanced individual who meets you at the same degree of, who has also managed to balance both the masculine and feminine portions of themselves. And then you have a twin flame mission, and then you accomplish that job, and then you go to the next level, and the groupings get larger. So maybe you engage in a particular task with, you know, a small group of people, and then the group's going to get larger, and then the group's going to get larger. And very often, you know, you're doing a number of different groups. Creation in the fifth dimension. Oh, I should say that that one of the things one of the things you're developing in experience, the experience of the other, when you're meeting with your twin or a divine partner for any particular task. And I just did this with Dave Yellen in the last live stream just a few minutes ago. We have a particular task between two balanced individuals. The importance of that is you have to develop the ability to experience the other person's reality as yourself. Basically, you experience the other person as being your mirror, and what they feel, you feel. Particularly in any true twin flame pair. And the vast majority of people who are having a twin flame echo experience or twin flame esque experience are not actually true twin flames, but that doesn't mean to diminish them. They're having an experience they need to have in order to progress along with the rest of us. It's meant to be experienced by all who can do it. So I'm not knocking that at all. We needed as many people to carry it as possible. In an actual twin flame pair, which I'm not really going to talk too much about that today, but in an actual twin flame pair, you're going to have a shared experience. You're going to have the shared telepathy. You're going to have the shared emotional telepathy, the physical telepathy, basically like if something, you can share physical senses, and basically it becomes almost impossible to tell who's, you're the same being in two different bodies, is all it is. And that's toward a purpose. That's because that's a skill set that must be held by the collective, by everyone in a group, if the group functioning is to function correctly. Because going forward, what each one of us does matters. It's going to have an additional effect on everything else. And the reality of that, the experience of that, is going to be multiplied to such a degree. It's going to perpetuate very, very rapidly. It's going to be extremely contagious, if not instant. When the network is fully functional, It's a beautiful thing. It's extremely fast. That's why I have lightning fast manifestation. This is also the way that we're going to lift the planet vibrationally. When we're fully connected, we're going to have joy that is felt by all. The upliftment is going to be such that it's going to be experienced by every being on the planet. So we need to, there's a sequence, there's a sequential aspect to this. And it's been a bitch getting the first wave over. But now that the gates are open, all we had to do was reach the tipping point. It's going to pick up from here very quickly. It's not to say that we don't have stuff to do. We do. We definitely still have our work cut out, but the it's going to be a lot easier now from this point forward than it was before. Especially for those of, well, I should say for those of us on the in the first wave. It's going to rapidly feel as though we're rolling downhill as opposed to lugging everybody uphill. But going downhill in a good way. More like, oh, thank God, we can coast for a little bit. But we're going to be coasting and working also. But in comparison to what we had been doing, it's going to feel a hell of a lot easier. Going into creation mode, there are certain things that must be held, must be realized and understood very clearly, because the rules change. The rules of, there are certain, what's the word for that? I was going to say, use the word cautionary, but I don't want any, I'm running out of language. I want something that is not, that is fear-free. Because what it really does, there are just certain things that you need to be extremely mindful of, the fact that in the past dimensions, in the lower dimensions, as much as we bitched about the fact that manifestations took a long time, there was a certain protective quality to that. We had the luxury of a certain level of sloppiness that we could get away with because we had time to correct it. And when the circuitry was in the experience of separation, if I have a negative thought, it's more or less confined to my own experience, so that if I fuck up and I catch myself in a downward spiral of negative thinking, it's really only going to screw with me. It's not going to screw with everybody else really fast. So that's why having a real solid knowledge of the law of attraction, it's an important thing. And it's important to be very mindful going forward that everyone who actually makes it through the 11 gateway, the 11 gateway is almost like, it's almost like like everyone who gets there is you crawl up the ladder and you're shedding density and you're shedding your old programming. And then it's kind of like I had the image one time going into the 5th dimension was like stepping over a stone wall in an old graveyard and stepping into almost like going through a membrane, and on the other side, everything was light. But everything you think of manifests very quickly. So you have to be extremely mindful of what you create, because you're not only responsible for yourself and your immediate family or your associates, you're connected to everyone. So there's a got my purple plate, my rose quartz, and I ring the bell every time I get this distilled water. I get those big jugs of distilled water, and I have to bell all of them because I don't want, because water picks up energy, and I want to make sure that I'm not ingesting any influences like that. Because what you put into your vessel at this time really does matter. Having said that, we do have, it's kind of like the protection of the density of the third dimension, which did, I mean, as it didn't, it's not like the lower level of duality. Everything goes in two directions. So it's not like it was only bad. There was a protective aspect to the density as well. That's important to remember, because you're going to get whatever you focus on. Were they trapped? Yes. Did it take longer? Yes. There was also a protective influence. So we need to focus on the fact that we had a protective influence there. There's a lower version. So that's the lower version. There's, when you flip it up and you go into the fifth dimension, there's a protective influence in the fifth dimension as well. And the protective influence in the fifth dimension in terms of manifestation is that everyone there has also gone through the 11 gateways, so they don't carry the same kind of shitty thinking. And basically you're surrounded by brethren who are also high in dimension, who also care about the influences going into the collective. They don't want anybody to shit in the soup either. They're shit in the hot tub. And all of us who make it to the fifth dimension have gone through the spiritual maturity to the point where we already know how to transmute. So there's a period of, now that we've crossed over the immediate threshold, there's a, thank you, there's a period, a short period of time, even though we're outside of we're off the timeline. There's an initiation period where we're just kind of exploring and connecting with others in a new way. The energy is getting very, very much lighter. It's not about problem solving as much as it is about creating, and there's an excitement that we need to, that is also very contagious. So that serves a protective quality as well. And if in our various lives, once we connect, if something happens in somebody's life, we also serve in a protective capacity for one another, because we can very easily help our brethren, help those that we are connected to, recover from a negative spiral. That if we happen to, if there's somebody in the group who happens to do that, the rest of us are not easily capsized at this point. That's the way I wanted to say it. We stabilize one another. Later on, as we get further developed, there's going to be a point where the negative spirals, any negativity, it's really not going to, it's going to be less and less prevalent and less severe. So there's going to be a point where we're just not going to even have that anymore. But first, there's during the, we cross over initially, and even though we've been purified, there is still a certain amount of habitual thinking. There's still a certain amount of autopilot that all of us will tend to veer toward recreating old things, simply because it's like familiarity. What we're familiar with tends to be what we recreate if we're not really thinking about it. So it's one of those things that is just important to be mindful of, because there are certain things that many of us have been conditioned to think, to believe that that certain things are certain ways. We can't change X, Y, Z. None of that is true, but it's going to take a certain amount of deliberation to intentionally create things that go in a different direction. And it's very much like where there's a groove, if you're not, it's like energy, because so we all function in an energetic realm in the fifth dimension, and energy tends to takes the path of least resistance. So the path of least resistance is kind of like energy flows like water. So energy goes, it will go into the stream bed. So if you that's going to be the path of least resistance. So if you intend, and also the conditioning, the past conditioning, thinking things always go this way, and it's what can you do about it? Well, at this point, when we're over when we're on the other side of the fifth dimensional gateway, manifestations are faster. We are far more influential when we're in higher frequencies than we are when we're in lower frequencies. We don't get capsized so easily. We don't go into downward spirals as easily. And if we don't like the way that the stream bed is headed, we have far more influence to take it into a direction of our choosing. And that's what we need to do now. But we need to do it with intention and deliberation, because if we go on autopilot and we just allow the energy to flow where it flows, even though that there is a spiritual aspect to that. Like if you watch Abraham Hicks, you know that you get into the path of least resistance and you just flow. But there is a way that all must be handled, because that doesn't mean you can simply do what's easiest and it will necessarily take you where you want. That doesn't happen either. That's one of those spiritual principles that can and is very often utilized by negative forces who simply want to they're trying to feed their population too. In the third dimension, where there's duality, the darks, there's a higher and lower version of everything. The higher version says go with the flow and trust God and let it take you, just relax and go with the flow. The darker version of that, the devil has a side of that too. The devil will almost always, the devil's version will say something like, do it tomorrow. Wouldn't it be easier? It's so easy to just do this instead. Or don't you want to? It will be something very seductive, and it will almost always feel easier to do the sloppy thing, to do the job less well, to do, so it all comes down. So I guess so there's always this perpetual crossroad. There's always a choice point in the third and the fourth dimension. In the third dimension, you actually have kind of less, because that's why so many of us came to liberate Earth, because they were locked in the third dimension, because so much of the choice was actually unfairly removed, and their choice was taken away. But then in the fourth dimension, you meet all of these choices again. Your choice is back, but then you haven't ever learned how to really make choices. So it's the fourth dimension is very dicey, and there's a lot of battle and vying for dominance, and a lot of deception, because you can't sometimes in the fourth dimension, you can't tell which side is which. Very difficult. And if you try to go to a spiritual teacher who says something like go to the flow, but don't make it easier, but have your eye on an intention and fight for what you want and don't give up and things like that. There are all sorts of influences that want to vie for your energy. So how do you get yourself on your own path, your highest path? And one of the things, and also without giving your power away to anything else, a teacher, a deity, a guru, whatever. The fourth dimension is where you learn to do that. And so many of us who left the third dimension very eagerly and on the path of ascension. We were like, yeah, we want to lift up. And then we found ourselves in the fourth dimension, and it's quite chaotic. I met a couple of months ago. I a message from a woman who was very practiced in meditation, and she sent me a message, and she said, what the hell happened last night? She said, maybe you can answer my question. I've been meditating for 20 years, and I love my meditation practice, and I go to a particular location and I meditate, but I always go up to this particular place where I meditate. And last night, it's like I went there, and it's like I came up in the middle of a battle, and there was all this crashing and this fighting going on. And I was like, what happened? And she said, so I just went back down because I didn't know what to do. She said, what do you think happened? She said, it was like I came up in the middle of a battle. What do you think happened? And I said, I think you came up and it was in the middle of the battle because that's exactly what's happening. It was happening at the time. To a certain degree, it's still happening. There's still, there's a lot of chaos in the lower dimensions, but in the fifth dimension, there's none. What there is now going into a space of heightened creativity. But then now that we've just come over the threshold, there's a certain period of time where we have to kind of reorient ourselves to what instant manifestation actually feels like, because we haven't had that for a while. We have to wait, that's not it. We have to acquaint ourselves there are certain things that you can get away with thinking or creating in the third dimension and in the fourth dimension that you can't do. One, you'll sink. It won't be allowed to cross over. It will, if you're, actually, let me back up. I want to say this a different way. Not everything can be made in the fifth dimension. There has been a tendency to idealize. We've been aiming for the fifth dimension for so long. So many of us on this path have been saying, when we get there, it's like this idea of wish fulfillment. And that's true. There is all of this wish fulfillment. And it's so much lighter and so much happier. And we're only in the early stages of it now. And we haven't even in the physical realm. So many of us, I'm still in this 1-bedroom apartment. That's not for long, though, not for long. Many of us are still carrying traces or like physical encumbrances or things, not for long. We're only, this is energy precedes form. So we're creating in the energy first, and then it's going to coalesce, materialize. It will materialize in a new way. Energy creates form and circumstance. So we commence creating with a new energy, and in very short order, we're going to experience a new creation, a new circumstance, new flow. And we're going to be able to share that around. So there are certain things, there are different rules that apply creating in the third dimension. And one of those, so this is something that hasn't been spoken about very much. There are certain things that you can't, in the fifth dimension, what you creates your world. Your first creation is always yourself. Your first creation is yourself. Your first creation is yourself. So make sure you're solid, and make sure you're doing everything from a platform that is love-based, generous, something that has integrity. If you want your world to be one of quality, one of benevolence, one that was worth fighting for, one that we always knew could exist. We always knew it did. And now we want to share it with everyone else. But we have to make sure we don't take crap in with us. Took us a very, very long time to establish a space to purify the hot tub. So anybody who comes in has to know not to crap in the hot tub. The rest of us are in here too. We won't let you bring it in. So what does that mean for creation? What does that mean for storytellers? What does it mean for a lot of things in the fifth dimension going forward, especially, you know, one of the things that's going to change massively, I mean, like, well, literally like night and day. It's gonna change completely, is entertainment. Because collective consciousness, the group in the fifth dimension, we know the hell we went to get there. We don't want it to go back down there again. We have no interest in watching television that has anything to do with warfare, anything to do with serial killers or rape or any of, just take the crap out of our heads. We won't allow it. We won't have it. The vast majority of us don't own televisions. I don't have one. I still follow, I follow certain things if my guides are saying go watch X, Y, and Z, but they have to tell me to go watch it. And it's almost always because I'm doing a job that requires tweaking of some kind to adjust it, not to perpetuate it. I go in to do some kind of a maneuver that's going to change the direction of something, because I work really only with groups and mass consciousness. But one of the things that's going to be extremely important to be mindful of going forward is that as a collective in the fifth dimension, and I'm speaking to you as though you're one of the ones who has already crossed over. And I'm also speaking to those in the fourth dimension who are working their way up. In the fifth dimension, you are responsible for everyone whose vibration is beneath you. Under, you know, if it's lower than yours, there's an automatic additional responsibility that is automatic. With spiritual maturity comes increased responsibility for everyone who is not as spiritually mature as you. So you lose the certain luxuries. You gain certain responsibilities. There is a trade-off. It's like when we're children, when we're physical children, we don't have a hell of a lot of responsibility. Some of us did, I did, but there's a certain amount of responsibility that we don't have, but we also have less freedom. Somebody else makes our decisions for us. There is a version of that too in the fifth dimension. Well, it's basically the same thing. It's just flipped. There's something that I'm going to be, it's complex terrain to talk about, because there are certain things in certain ways. The fifth dimension, it's like the third dimension was very controlling and locked into basically dark. It was duality, but then it was extremely oppressive, and it was very difficult to gain the freedom, it was very difficult to get up in vibration. you know, historically, because it was locked so heavily into darkness and density, and it was incredibly difficult to rise. Then the fourth dimension is still a realm of duality, but it's way looser, so there's a lot more leeway, and things fluctuate a lot faster. A tremendous amount of shuffling goes on. But then in the fifth dimension, it's also strict again, but it's strictly light. So in a way, it's equally controlling, but it's equally controlling in terms of what it will no longer be tolerated. There are certain things that will not be tolerated. This is why in the fourth dimension, this was the realm of like the Council of Balance that I was on. We operated from the 12th dimension, but most of our presence or our activity, our adjusting, took place in the fourth dimension. Like the fourth dimension is where it's like the spirit realm, where you have you know, spirits, ghosts, etc. A lot of astral travel goes through there. And then you also have archons and archangels also. Archangels are from elsewhere, but still, like the fourth dimension is where there's a lot of vying for energy. There's a lot of fighting for the energy that's the energy of the population who's still in 3. So the choices that they make determines which side, archon or archangel, who gets the energy from them. So the entertainment choices basically in the fourth dimension, I'm sorry, in the fifth dimension and the fourth dimension, you can do things to the sleepers, the sleeping population, because they really are fair game, and it's to their benefit too. If you just left them sleeping, you know, they don't know enough to steer themselves. The sleepers in the third dimension. It's not about trying to take their power away from them. I can say from personal experience that as Joan of Arc was an icon that we strategically put in specifically to get as many people stronger and taking their own power. There was a mechanism, there was a strategy to that extremely long-term strategy that started at the time of David. And I'm not going to talk about that a lot now, but at this point, the job is every single icon must come down, because you can't have icons in the fifth dimension. They don't exist. And so all icons must come down. So one of the purposes of me talking about the Joan of Arc lifetime is to, one, because I've got group karma, and having been Joan of Arc, it's my job I took it and I have to put it back, which is that was the job anyway. We always knew that was going to happen. There were certain things that went awry, but one of the things that we knew was going to happen, the Joan of Arc lifetime, we only landed, the group of us only landed to do that mission, the group of us. The intention landing at that particular juncture was so that enough people would have, it was toward female empowerment, equality of men and women, and there were a whole bunch of things that we initiated there, planting a seed so that it would grow and be fully mature, so that when the 11 gateway opened, we could say hands off and see how many of them had picked it up, and how many of them were we able to steer toward physical maturity, encourage, accelerate toward spiritual maturity, so that they could get through the gateway. So we're going to be talking a lot more about that later. But the whole idea that the reason that those of us who are pouring through the gateway now, there are certain things that that we now have the luxury of creating, that we were waiting for and waiting for and waiting for, and now the time has arrived when we can collectively pop these things into existence. Collective miracles, we can bring them in much faster. We can do it individually, we can do it as a collective. So I encourage us to do that. One of the first things we need to do is hang on. I'm thinking about the okay, I'm going to finish talking about creation first, and then I'm going to go back to the financial system, because the financial system, when 5D is fully operational and fully mature, like right now we just crossed the threshold, so it's still new to us, and the fully operational system, it's not fully operational yet. There's a period of adjustment, and just so being responsible for the lower dimensions means being responsible for the lower dimensions. There is an aspect to the lower dimensions that still requires money. There's a turnover. There would be, if we eliminated money now, it would cause a tremendous amount of chaos and fear from those who, you have to understand the mentality of, and I mean this from in a compassionate way, you can't just dump something on people who are not ready for it. You can't force a seedling to grow before it's ready. You can do everything you can possibly do to encourage it. You can provide all of the things it needs for its growth. And in a higher dimension, you actually can cause it to grow a lot faster. What the hell happened? What just happened? Oh, come on. Did I just lose you? Hang on. What just happened? What just happened? Okay. I don't know why. I just got something on my screen. In the fifth dimension, you actually can cause things to pop into reality much faster, to materialize much faster. You absolutely have that. But there's a time. There's still a process, and the fourth dimension and the third dimension move at a much, much slower rate. It would be damaging to them if we stretch them to make them taller. You can't do that. You must absolutely meet your population where they are. You must meet them where they are. So if there are still so many people who are asleep, whose souls have the intention of being, who actually their souls do want to ascend, but the physical, the personality portion isn't ready, or it's still asleep, or still has processing to do, or it's just taking a lot longer, you yanking them and forcing awareness on them would actually be extremely traumatic. If you think about forcing awakening on someone who believes that it doesn't have any belief in God, or doesn't believe that dragons exist, or if you suddenly yanked the veils apart and they had a sudden awakening, anybody who's had one like I did, and I was awake, I was on this, have always been interested in things like that. And still, when I had a full Kundalini awakening, and it shot up very, very quickly. And even with my background, it was so quickly that it mimics psychosis. Somebody who has no context for that, if they're walking around and they suddenly see something like a dragon, they think they're going crazy. So there is a way, it is imperative that those of us who have crossed over the threshold be as mindful of the well-being of others who are not yet at that stage. It is imperative that we be the wisest steward that we can possibly be. Stretch your capacity to be a wise steward of everything, all other beings. This is now your job. And it's a complex one. And I'll tell you, it gets more complex the higher up you go, because it's kind of like the geometry is such that if you start out in the third dimension as the point of the triangle, it goes up in an equilateral triangle. So, and that's not the only thing it does, but that's one of the things it does, is that it stretches out. And the further up in vibration you go, the further up in dimension you go, you learn that you are a steward of everything, and all is one. So all of a sudden you wind up looping around to the initial experience, except it's very expanded, where in the 12th dimension you become, all is one and everything is you. And it's basically another version of ego, except it's not, because you're just, it's all one. There is no you. You're everything and also nothing. But for the purposes of the 5th dimension, it is now your job to participate actively in the upliftment of all others. And we know, and be as compassionate in the experience as possible, because we know how difficult it was. We've gone up that ladder ourselves, so we're very familiar with all of those stages. And I will tell you that you can expect that everyone who comes in to your, who you meet, everyone who comes into your awareness, everyone that you meet is there for a reason. Like, this happens. You're not going to meet anyone by accident. And that doesn't mean it's you know this already. And that doesn't mean it's your job to teach them or, wake them up or whatever. But it is. It is your job. Okay, so this is what I wanted to say about that. In the 5th dimension, it is a realm of full transparency. That doesn't mean that you can't keep anything private, but it does mean that secrets will no longer be tolerated. You must be able to withstand full transparency. That doesn't mean that you need to, blab your business. Everything is also kind of on a need-to-know basis as well. So you can still have certain things that are private. It's not like you have to have everybody follow you into the bathroom, but hang on a second. But everything must be able to withstand honesty and transparency, and keeping things hidden is no longer, that's no longer acceptable. For example, if we expect full transparency in every institution, we are the ones who, everything is going to be our mirror. So it's not like, it's like you can keep closed doors provided that you are the one who establishes the integrity. So everything is going to emerge from you. Everything is going to be a mirror of the collective. And that's why, so when our telepathy, when our connective circuitry is fully operational, you all know, if you're doing it, you know that there's how we can recognize one another, how souls recognize truth. And the reason that certain things were possible, it was possible to hide certain things before because it was a realm where darkness existed. So darkness could had a hiding spot. The fifth dimension is a realm of integrity. If we want the institutions to be fair and just, we take it upon ourselves first, so that the energy that passes through us, since we're all connected and the energy is constantly circulating, and none of us are hoarders, that's also something that stayed in 3. Everyone in the fifth dimension is going off a platform of constant service, constant giving, constant service, constant giving, and it passes through us, and we are going out in a platform of loving service constantly. And it's so interesting because it functions a little bit like a sandwich. This is why this was in Frozen, where Anna was talking about, there's always the mention of a sandwich. At some point, I'm going to go and talk about those movies. There's a sequence. The fifth dimension, the initial platform is one where everything goes through this gateway, where everyone on the other side of the gateway is in the, you know how there's service to self and service to others? Everyone who's passing through is of the service to others design. They've learned that now. Their service to others, 100% service to others. But the interesting thing is that in serving others, the first rule is that you must serve yourself first and take care of yourself first in order to serve others. So it's kind of like service to others, service to self, service to others. There's a stacking, and that's one of the things that prevents us from going into depletion. And that's also the platform. It establishes the platform of plenty, where no longer are we coming from a place of lack and need. We're actually coming from a place of overflowing and love. We're never experiencing, the desperation, the grasping. All of that is gone, because we ourselves are full of love, and now all we do is overflow and overflow and overflow. And the beautiful part of it is that we're there in a collective of people, and we all do the same things. So it's just creating, giving. And the only time you go into a place of depletion, a place of where you need something, is to give somebody else the pleasure of giving. And the beautiful thing is that when our circuitry is all fully connected, and we've all gone through this thing with our twin flame or the divine counterpart, where we experience what they experience, the way that it's heightened and perpetuates is that when somebody needs something and you want to give something to someone and you want them to experience pleasure, because everyone so in the third dimension there were competing forces, and the dark forces feed on fear. So there's always vying for fear, discomfort, lack, all of that crap. When that's all out of the way, you're just surrounded by other people who are nourished by love. And in the connection, when you feel what I feel what you feel, and you need something, and I give you a gift or anything else, and you feel pleasure or satisfaction or happiness from the receiving of it, I feel that at the same time you do, and the pleasure is heightened, it's doubled, and it continues in a loop. And for those of you who for those of you who do have actual twin flames and remember interdimensional sex, multidimensional sex, this is one of the reasons that you get this heightened creative capacity. This is one of the things that's absolutely going to lift the planet. The circuitry must all be connected, because what you do is you keep the joy flowing and you connect it out to everyone else. The twin flame grid takes on a special flavor. You're like, yeah, give me some of that. We need more twin flame couples that can do that and just keep it running. You're going to wind up lifting the planet really fast. There's still a certain amount of purging that has to go on in the third wave, definitely. Most of them haven't begun to wake up. The second wave is the largest. Most people are in the second wave, and they're in the process of awakening, and they're going through the feeling of the purging, the purging process. They're going through their clearing. But those of us who are in the third wave, the first wave, it's our job now. What a great job, man. Great job. Great job. And it's about time we had a good job too, right? Because we're coming out of, man, I shove it. That was the pits. That was horrible. Then we can shrug it off and get into our happy zone. Accelerate that. Our job now is to connect as fully as possible with all others. I would encourage you, I do encourage you, to share this particular video and also the last one, because there's going to be more and more and more about creation. What we need to do now, our strategy now, is to connect with as many people as possible who are in the higher dimensions, and rev up the happy energy. Start to really focus. Now we're in creation. The purging process can be left behind us, and now we just need to focus strictly on creating and establishing the architecture for the prolific circulation of joy. What do we want to see? So this is why, and being also extremely mindful that in the higher dimensions, we have everything we do is going to dramatically affect those who are still going through the process, so we can speed the process by which they get rid of the darkness. We can definitely ease their way dramatically. So one of the things we need to do now is really focus on, it's okay to get very, I want to use the word wanty, but that's kind of the wrong thing. Like, very creative and determined, almost as though our minds and our emotions have a heightened creative magic quality about them, where we can look at something and say, I intend you to do X, Y, Z. I want to see it like this, and it will happen. The more of us agree, the faster it will happen. But really, I think most of us will agree. The specifics may change, but I'll tell you one other thing that's changing. I think this is so interesting. You know how for the longest time, so many of us have been, and we still will continue, like we've been really watching our diets, and it's been for a long time, for so many of us, it's been very reductionist, because we're all about purify, purify, purify. I went on a distilled water fast, short, but so many of us have been about, reducing to, only certain things that were vibrationally compatible with us. Not immediately, but down the road a little bit. There's once our vibration is high enough, we're going to be operating in a strata where even if, and plus we will have, it's not like we're going to have the pollution anymore, or the chemicals, or the, the crap in the food, etc. But for example, if once we, a little bit ways down the road, there's going to be a point where that anything we eat, we're going to be the determining factor on how it affects us. Like if I wanted to, just for sheer fun, eat candy all day, and that was the only thing I wanted to do, like right now, that still wouldn't be a very good idea for me, but down the road, I'll be able to eat whatever the hell I want, and it won't make a damn bit of difference. I could, once you're, I can't do that with you right now. Walk away. You'll no longer be affected by anything. Anything external won't be able to affect you. If you are being of light, you are the determining influence that affects everything else, and not the other way around. So for the time being, we're not quite there, but it's coming. It's absolutely coming. So I wanted to talk a little bit about for those of you who haven't followed my previous live streams, not the one I did just immediately because this was truncated a little bit and then I had to go into a second one. This is part 2. Go back and watch the other one. It was, I thought it was going to be Dave Yellen's private session. And it kind of was. We're still doing some adjusting there, but really he was the other gateway post, and now we've established the gateway. I didn't know that was going to happen. And now everyone's flooding through en masse. We opened up a gateway, and the live stream that I did just prior, I would encourage you to I would ask you, please go on YouTube and follow The Ascension Ark. That's my YouTube channel. It has like virtually nobody. I'm thinking of changing all of my live streams to the YouTube venue because it would save me a certain amount of time. I'm thinking of doing that. Obviously haven't done it yet. But if you guys could go to The Ascension Ark on YouTube and like, subscribe, and share, that would be helpful. Because I think I may wind up switching to a live stream there instead. I'm going to see how it goes. I know that I'm being called off to start a school, do a book, go on a speaking tour, and there are several other smaller things. And I also know I'm going to be moving very shortly. I've been told this. And before I go into there's something about Los Angeles too. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I know that we're going to be addressing as a group. A lot of light workers are being moved to Los Angeles because of what's about to happen, and we need to have a counteracting influence there. And we're going to be doing things in the entertainment industry that's extremely important. So I'm going to be talking about that too. But what was the okay, I'm going to talk about that later. Just a second. Okay. If any of you want a private session or a shared session, a public session, I'm not sure how that's going to work. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I think for a short time more, until they specifically tell me not to, I'm going to continue to do private sessions. But I know that they're not going to last for that much longer. So if you want one, send me a private message. If you can make a donation, you can go on my wall and make a donation. I would greatly appreciate it. Really greatly appreciate it. At this time, I'm going to put my PayPal thing up there. Okay, so now I want to talk about the realm of new creation. Going forward, there are certain things This is popping into my head, so I'm going to mention it because I know it affects a couple of people, and it affects them. It probably affects more of you. There are some of you, okay, they're telling me this. Twin flame union, I have to approach that differently, sorry. Hang on. Okay, they're telling me to back up and approach it a different way. There are certain things that will prevent individuals from going through, thank you, okay, I got it. There are certain things that will prevent individuals from passing through the 11 gateway. And much of that has to do with sending mixed signals related to being attached to certain things that are purely third dimensional. Okay, thank you. So here's what happened to me, and then I'm going to tell, it relates to an example, and it actually does relate to something that I'm going to tell you about the entertainment industry. I'm going to bring it back around. No matter how strongly you are intending and doing your own work, okay, I'll use my own example. For a very long time now, I've been working extremely hard, spinning my wheels and making virtually no progress, spinning my wheels and working toward the acceleration so that I could reach the fifth dimensional gateway and go through it. I knew my job, and I've been working very, very fast, hard, gunning the engine, accelerating, manically working toward this aim. And it felt as though a bungee cord, a really strong freaking bungee cord, lots of them, were holding me back. And little by little, I was losing those attachments and working to lose those attachments. And I was still held by the one that I couldn't get away from that one. And the thing that I was attached to was my twin, my real twin. I'm an actual twin. So the twin flame. And because I was feeling, because we share emotions and bodily feelings, and I couldn't, and he was pointed in the other direction. He was very locked into third dimensional construct, and there was also a whole bunch of dark attack on his end, and I couldn't get forward because I kept getting pulled back, and it became, even though we're doing the same job, there was a tremendous amount of it was creating its own problem, because the more I pulled, it was not in cooperation. So there is a thing. So I've been working on this for a really long time. And for a while, my approach was to help him clear his stuff. But what I didn't realize was that he was actively trying to pull in a different direction. And also there were people trying to hold him too. So it was causing its own delay is the thing. And also we've been out of contact, and so there was no communication, and that was really a problem because we couldn't get I'm very often have been confused as to who was saying what, because I'm in a group, not just, I wasn't just with him, and I'm picking up on so many other things too, that there was a tremendous amount of communication. It was very uneven terrain to get through, and I couldn't make sense of it, so it made navigation difficult. And in the group that I was in, I was the navigation person. So when they cut me off, it was the only thing I had to go on to navigate with was my connection to my twin. So I didn't want to, number one, I can't sever it, but if I didn't want to cut it off or ignore it, because that would be stupid, because I need that to navigate. And also I needed to get information to them. So, to everyone else. So that wouldn't be a good idea. I have had called, demanded, begged for divine intervention, and the divine knew that, and they were on that task anyway. And the last night I had a very interesting dream, because so much activity goes on at night. I was actually taken offline for basically the last 3 days, where I had to spend 3 days basically going, drinking distilled water, being in the shower in a salt tub, and just in bed, not doing much. And last night I had this dream, and in the dream it was very interesting. Just this one portion where it was just a black void, and someone wrote out the words, and I know it was Josh, because it was the same thing that happened in Legion, the series Legion, which I don't follow, but my guides had told me to go watch that because it was pertinent. The words, or the word L-E-A-V-E, leave, was written in light capital letters, like you took a pen in light and wrote leave in a field of black. And I thought, well, what do you mean? But then today I understand why that is. That's what I kind of thought was supposed to happen. They put down you can't actually sever the cord, but they severed the experience so that it's not constantly in my way, in my mental space all the time. They basically severed my experience of it so that I could take all of my energy and focus it purely on going forward with my jurisdiction of the people that I was supposed to lead over. So that's what happened today, and that's why they gave me a masculine counterpart to work with, to do the function that because Josh has been held back for whatever reason. So they gave me a substitute column to be the other, to be the other column. So thank you, Dave Yellen. And now we're getting everybody through, and that takes us to, it kind of helps us catch up, because we were behind schedule. We're trying to get as many people flooded into 5 to establish a presence there that can have a vibrational impact, so that it can help the second wave process their stuff faster and get as many people spilled over into 5 as possible. Okay, so that said, now what? In the 5th dimension, the energy picks up. Hollywood is going to change. All entertainment is going to change, and it is up to us to change it. So stepping up into the experience of being a creator is the experience of being the one who affects things, as opposed to one who is affected by all external circumstance. So it's important to make sure that you're doing things mindfully and not slip into old automatic tendencies. And these things can be very subtle. And mostly it's because we just crossed over the threshold, and there's a period of time of just getting our bearings and deciding what we want. It's going to be very important to decide with clarity what we actually want. What do we want it to look like? That's the thing. There's been such a conditioning so far that the world looks this way, and if you want to know if you want to know what success looks like, you look around for other ways to do, other people who have done it. Well, if you're in a field where it's completely like something where there is no groove, There is no road. You're the one who makes the road. We're the one who makes the road. And we're going to, since we're the ones who are going across the threshold first, we're creating the road that others will go on. So it's especially, we need to take special care for what we want the terrain to look like. They're going to arrive at the city that we have made. So it's up to us to establish a realm with no fear, a realm that is welcoming, a realm that, oh, so here's one thing that I was told. I was told that, a couple of things. In 2013, I had a very strong and repeated vision where I was on one side of a gargantuan canyon that was like the Grand Canyon, extremely deep, and way on the other side of it, I could see a teeny little figure that was also me. And I was sitting looking at myself, or standing, or I think I was sitting actually, on the edge of this canyon, and it was a sunset. And the canyon was quite deep, and really jagged, and it was all rock. But I could see myself on the other side of it, with wings too, but it was me. And I had an angel on the left side of me, and the angel said to me, in this timeline, it has already been done. You're already there. So now, and they were telling me that because, so I didn't know how awful it was going to be. But they showed me this deep and rocky and extremely treacherous and jagged canyon. No path. And they showed me that I had made it to the other side. I was actually on the other side, and we were going to make it. And they said, in this timeline, you've already done it. You have already done it, but now you have to go do it, if that makes any sense. So it does make sense to those of us who function outside time. You can very easily see that you're also over there. But but from this perspective, you still have to make that journey. And I didn't quite realize, even though I saw that the canyon was extremely jagged and rocky and really deep and horrible, it still didn't look quite as bad as it got. It still looked like it was a sunset, and it was like pinks and orange and yellow and light. And it was only when I went into the canyon that it got just black as pitch. That was perfectly horrible. So I'm not going to talk about that a lot, but I will say that I was told already, I was shown that the first wave of us going over, we're going to feel, we knew what it was going to look like. And that's why we went willingly. We went willingly into the leading edge because our desire was leading us. We were leading with our heart because we wanted to get there so much, because we know it's better. We know it's so much better than the third dimension. So it was our pure drive to get everyone there. That's why it's also our job to establish it. Build the cities of light. What is that going to look like? It's going to happen in our head first. So it's going to be extremely important for us to, this is one of the reasons that telepathy is there for a reason. And the speed, the accelerated manifestation. Yes, it's going to take work, but it's not going to be anywhere near as hard as it would have been to build a city in the third dimension. For one thing, let's just get happy for a moment and say, for one thing, in the fifth dimension, down the road just a little ways, not that bad, You know, there are a lot of things that aren't going to happen anymore that we've really been conditioned to think were necessities, like you had to have them and it's just the way it is. We all hate it, but we all hate it, but it's just the way it is. Bullshit. Documentation. Imagine the amount of paperwork. If you never had to do, if everything is true, if we're all operating from a platform of truth and we're all family and everyone gets the family discount, we all know one another, and you can see somebody's energetics, even when we go up even higher, you can see somebody's energetic qualities, and plus it doesn't matter what they are anyway, just feed them. The amount of proving things and documentation and paperwork, let's just imagine there's no more paperwork. There aren't going to be any more electric bills. Housing is going to be free. The healthcare industry, that's going to be completely transformed. So we're the ones who do that because we know what it's supposed to look like. You're supposed to be able to, and you can actually now, see the health, see the way you intend it to be, the way it's supposed to be. You know that bodies aren't supposed to decay and age and be decrepit, and you're not supposed to have invasive procedures. You know that chemotherapy is a bunch of crap. You should be able to just envision the health and have it be so, and you get a miracle and you press on with your day, and you didn't have cancer to begin with. That's really more the point. So many things, we have to be open to our wildest imaginations becoming manifest. There's going to be things that are going to pop into existence much, much faster. We're not going to have the same kind of security, the same kind of perceived security that was really rooted in fear. That's not going to happen anymore. All kinds of things. So we're not going to have poverty anymore. The most important thing to remember is that our intention, those of us who have crossed the threshold, our intention is magnetic. Our intention is, it's radiant, and it has a tremendous impact on the world around us. Impact is the wrong word. I don't like that word. Influence. Hey, get out of the oatmeal. I thought it was him. I wasn't sure which dog it was. One of our dogs knows how to open the pantry door, and he goes into the instant oatmeal and he takes some, which I only have one box of instant oatmeal, but he takes a package of instant oatmeal and he takes it into the living room, or usually on the couch or like my bed or something. He rips it open and he just licks it. Yeah, you. I'll feed you in a minute. One of the things that we need to do is begin to So we already do this. All of those of us who have crossed into the fifth dimensional threshold, past through the 11 gateway, get used to communicating with all other beings. The educational system is going to change enormously. It's going to be all inclusive. All other beings. All other beings are our teachers. I'm going to do a whole live stream, but they tell me not to do it yet for several reasons. The healthcare industry is going to change enormously. And the medical professionals who previously poo-pooed us, alternative healers, are actually going to start to ask us how we do what we do. And everything is going to shift. There's going to be a resurgence. There's no such thing as unemployment. In the fifth dimension, anyone who's gone through this gateway knows that all we do is you're always in service. You're always working, but it's not everything is a chore. The work is the joy. The caring is the joy, particularly when you love the person and you're feeling the same thing they feel. When you care for them, it's a gift to you. You feel it. You feel the relief. I used to be a preschool teacher, and among other things, I was also a nanny for a really long time, and I also have 2 daughters. And even though, yes, sometimes you have a stinky diaper that, I've gagged at certain diapers, sure. But personally, I actually really like changing diapers. I've always thought, no, it's not about the diaper change. It's about the service to the baby or the service to the child. I've always really genuinely felt that that was a lovely, intimate time where you can connect with, when you can connect and care for a baby. I actually don't mind that job. There are a lot of preconceptions that nobody would want to, like be a sewer worker, or nobody, who are you going to get to, pick up the garbage? And there are a lot of things in the fifth dimension that we don't have that. We don't have that asshole mindset, actually, is what's missing. What we have is genuine care. Because it's not that there are people who are unwilling to do those jobs. There was a deficit of appreciation. But when we're all one and we all feel the relief, like, thank God somebody cleaned the house today. Thank God the dishes were done. Thank God the sewers are running. And thank you, the person who did it. The caregivers are revered in the fifth dimension. And the funny thing is, everyone is revered in the fifth dimension because there is equality and we all recognize one another because we're all family. So now we're as of today, the first large group of us went over, and we are the transparency pioneers. We are the fifth dimensional creators. We're the pioneers. So now it's up to us what we want to create. And most of us are in agreement. So the only caveat really is to be mindful that we're not creating in reverse. We can't go forward by looking out the rear view window. We know how bad that was. So we can't. So one of the reasons, like, for example, the legal system is going to change. Number one, there's not going to be crime the way we had. If you had a perceived imbalance, you can check out the energetic. You can check out the energies, and you can see where the imbalance is. And plus, there is if 2 parties are in a tussle, they're going to sink to 4 or to go some. They're going to go into a lower dimension, so they're not even going to be our problem. We're not going to have that. The legal system was founded on principles of, problems to solve. We were looking for problems, and it was all rooted in precedent. And you can't go forward that way. And it was also, it allowed for the existence of lying and strategy and trying to outdo one another by manipulation. So we're not going to have any of that. We're not even going to think about it anymore. The educational system is going to change enormously, where the children and the children and the adults, that, it has been in the past, there was the misunderstanding, or I guess it was just that way, that the adults know what to do, so they're going to mold the children. But really, there's much more of an equality built into the fifth dimension, because the children come in as the updates. So the same way our phones have been, it's like we've been now conditioned to update your phone periodically because you need to get the latest information, the latest version. The children are going to be coming in as the teachers just as much as the parents are going to be teaching the children. So there's built-in 50-50 equality there. And there's basically, there's just equality. It's a realm of equals. The hierarchy has vanished. There are still versions of hierarchy, like spiritual, like as I said before, there's spiritual maturity. That doesn't mean there's a value-based hierarchy. A blade of grass is not worth less than a sequoia, but a sequoia has a different job, a different role to play than a blade of grass. In my opinion, neither one of them should be chopped. Don't mow them down. This is a time of tremendous restoration and galactic celebration, I might add, because the cheers going through, like, can they do it? Never before. This is such an interesting planet. Never before has a planet ascended while still having a physical experience, ascending the physical vessel too. Usually planets ascend and they go into light body, and there's a light version, but the actual, the stuff remains in a lower dimension. So we're going to see how we do it. And one of the, well, no, I'm not going to talk about that now. When you get held back, like the further you get held back, the more the tension. When it finally releases, the further the arrow flies. That's us. That's our planet. Not quite there yet. We still have, if we're the first wave, we still have the two other waves. So let's just focus on that now. But this is a time of tremendous celebration. The first wave has now gone through. I mean, the first wave is still moving through. It's not like it's like there's no hard edges to anything, really. Nonetheless, the first group of us, we overflowed. We've gone through the 11 gateway. I think I'm gonna close this pretty soon, but I did want to say that the entertainment choices, you got to be mindful of of sending mixed messages. For those of you who are counseling, those counseling or influencing, we're all influencing now, those on the upcoming wave, everybody who hasn't gone through the gateway yet. There are a lot of people who are sending mixed messages. This is what I started to say about being influenced previously by my twin. The reason that I was fluctuating or it was interfering with a certain amount of my faith, which is normally extremely strong, extremely strident, and very, very strong and determined and gung-ho to go off the cliff. But I was being influenced by my twin's doubt, so it was coming out of my mouth. It was kind of repeating, and I was getting pulled back into it a lot. Because I actually needed the division in order to go forward. And once I anchor in 5, they're gonna reconnect, and then I'm gonna be able to pull him through. So that's actually one of the tactics that other people can use. Other people are gonna use it. And I'm thinking specifically about, let me rephrase it this way. If you're someone, I'm thinking of a couple of specific people, and you may be listening. If you're someone who is struggling with going forward, or you're still in a period of time where you're really in a period of lack or striving and unable to get the thing that you want, or you're trying to manifest like a specific project and you're unable to get it off the ground, and no matter what you do, it keeps getting, you can't. Bring it into manifestation. You're going to be able to do it when you cross the threshold, go over the threshold. But you have to make sure that you're not the thing. So the thing that's preventing you from going through the gateway is the attachment to something else that is not as high vibrational as you want to be. So for example, if you're doing a project, or if you're a creative person and you're trying to manifest something and get it to go, and you're very attached to it, but for example, there's something about that project that is itself still in a low vibrational frequency. If you're attached to it, you can't cross that threshold because it is holding you back. So what you have to do is drop your attachment to whatever the portion. You can manifest a higher version of it. But for example, if you are a screenwriter and you want to manifest something that is, if you want to manifest, and you've been working on manifesting something that is that deals with something that would be very popular in Hollywood, like a series that deals with serial killers. Happens all the time. People produce this kind of show all the time, or this kind of movie all the time. That's what people want to see. I'm just trying to put food on my table. I'm desperate for money. I just want to get this project off the ground so it can get funding so I can produce that. So that is inherently at odds with your desire to be in the fifth dimension. In the fifth dimension, you cannot take a fearful influence. You can't take fear into some place where fear doesn't exist. So you're going to have to choose whether you want to be someplace. You can continue to be someone who produces screenplays or something like that, but you can't be attached to the story that involves serial killers or rape or any of the things that are very commonplace and even approved of by the population. Really, really popular. We like to see this thing. Well, you're going to have to choose. You can have that, or you can have a fifth dimensional happy existence. You can choose struggle, or you can choose ease. But when you're going in the fifth dimension, you're going to have to give up. You don't have to give up the form, but you have to give up anything that couldn't. Basically, your subject matter has to be able to pass through that gateway too. So you're going to have to, if you have. And I've said in past live streams, if you didn't hear, that in creation, I have a background as a painter, and you can't just paint with the light colors. You're going to need the entire spectrum, the rainbow. We value the entire spectrum. So it's not like you can't have anything dark or discuss anything dark. Or like the dark is dead to me. You can't. We're not going to do that. We're doing that by we're creating from everything. We're loving everything. It's all unconditional. But we have to be very, very cautious that we're not that we're creating from love and not. And if we're utilizing, for example, I go back to J.K. Rowling all the time. You can still talk about Voldemort. You can still deal with darkness, but be extremely careful that you don't promote fear. Because as soon as you do, I mean instantly, in the fifth dimension, you're going to fall out. So if you're somebody who is struggling, why can't I get there? Why can't I get there? Take very careful inventory of what you're attached to and see if any of the things that you are really attached to and you really don't want to let those things go. you're going to have to, if it's a project, you're going to have to make a choice. It doesn't mean that you can't be, you know, as I said, you can still, you're just going to have to figure out that balance. Though if there's something that's holding you back, check out your attachments and see what are the things that you're very attached to who are dark, or what are, you know, where is the dark influence? And if you're attached to something that can't go with you yet, you're going to have to sever it. Oh, here's another thing too. So that doesn't mean it's not going to come back to you. That's a big thing. So many of us, particularly with family members, and particularly with our twins too, but also with family members. Like I had to do this with one of my daughters, and I had to do it with a lot of my family members. So often when, you know, we have this feeling like we want to pull them up too, we want to save them. If one of your family members that you're really attached to, and man, you don't want them to go and be stuck in 3, you want to get them out too. A fast way, much faster, and really it's also the only way to do it. You know how everyone has to go through their own process? You can't be in the 5th dimension unless you have learned your own lessons. You can't learn somebody else's lessons for them. It's going to be faster for them, faster for you, more pleasant for you, still grueling. It's hard to cut attachments to things that you love. Love is also not attachment. Love is love, attachment is attachment. But the 3rd dimensional version, you know, love takes that costume a lot. Sometimes what we think of as love is actually attachment. True love is actually freedom. So if you really love your family member and they are determined to go into lower dimensions, or in, you know, they're determined to stay in the 3rd dimension, they want to stay asleep, they want to go, they like those things, you must absolutely let them go and let them have it. They're going to learn faster that way. As soon as they open up and consider the possibility, it has to be consensual. Spiritual development, you can't force spiritual development on someone. The best way to force it is to let them hit rock bottom. I guarantee it. That's why politics and the world affairs are so dark right now on the planet, because the mass amount of mass consciousness, the large number of people have to reach rock bottom and say, basically the old system has to get tight and horrible and non-functional enough, so enough to get, so that those people who were very attached to it has to get bad enough so that they say, okay, I let this go. I'm willing to leave it. It's not working. Even I admit that this isn't working. You have to let it get that bad. It's actually the quickest way out of suffering. The least amount of suffering often is hitting rock bottom and letting go, as opposed to keeping something barely surviving and really miserable but limping along for a long duration of time. That's actually feeding the dark side. That's one of the strategies they use. That's one of the things that the welfare system does, is it creates a population of people, and it gives them just enough so that it appears to be helping them, to keep them surviving, but in constant lack and fear and grasping. That's actually one of the things that produces a tremendous amount of loosh for the dark side, and it gets you in there, but it looks like it's helpful, but it's not. It's actually just part of the fear farm. So part of getting out is letting it crash. And I'm not saying don't feed the people. I'm saying feed the people, demolish the system. But the system has to be so obvious that it's not working, that the majority of the population says, it's like a hot something, that they let it go. Like, forget it, I'm not going to do this again. Even I will let this go. The people who are trapped the most are those who are very attached to the way they think, you know, they're most in fear, are the people who think that the third dimension really works for them, so they try to keep it. But though, if that's the case, you're going to have to let them go. That doesn't mean that they're not going to come to 5 also. That actually means that's the way to get them there faster. They're going to have to go do their own work. They may go through a dark night of the soul, and when they do, that's when the very often, very, very often, that is when, you know, the heart breaks open because they're having such a terrible time. That's actually when they often issue their first cry to God, if they have no God realization up to that point. That's very often going to be your avenue where then you can assist. But you must actually release the attachment. So if you're someone who is still in a place of struggle, look at what you're attached to. Release. I'm not saying it's easy. It's horrendous. But release that. And I will say that if you're in that position, like I know that I was having a very difficult time detaching from my twin. It's been 6 years, and I hear conversations. I hear what's going on in his household. I have felt things that were happening in his body. I could see out his eyes a lot. I really didn't know how to detach that. And it was pulling me back so much that I called on a divine intervention many times. But you have to demand it. Demand a divine intervention. Help me release anything that I'm attached to. Whatever it is, you have to be really willing to let it go. And your desire for forward movement has to be stronger than your desire to hold on to whatever was preventing you from it. They are going to come. They are going to come too, especially if you're one of the people who has a genuine twin flame. There's no way in hell. You came to lift the planet. There's a strategy also when the true twins finally do come together. Like right now, I know that I'm going before Josh. I'm going through the doorway first because I have to take the first wave. I have to be in the first wave so that I can kind of help establish the architecture, help create, make the infrastructure. I have to talk about creation a lot. We're going to be doing a lot of work, but shortly, the second wave is going to come through. And I will tell you that it's when the twins actually come together, the sheer amount of energy that comes from actual twins, when one of them is very, very anchored, very much a part of the earth, and they're well, both of them really. You have reached the height, and you've also reached the earth and the grounding. And when they actually come together, the amount of energy is so staggeringly huge, and the joy and the love, and it's just going to go. That's one of the reasons it's going to go out in such a blast. It's such a powerful love wave. And that's one of the reasons that we have to establish the network, the connectivity, the grid that is firmly anchored in the fifth dimension must be operational. All of us need to be connected. Our telepathy must be fully operational. Because when we and in equality also, because for example, if it was a circulatory system that was like the physical body, where you have arteries and veins and capillaries, and they're different sizes and they can carry different quantities, we can't really have that. I mean, to a degree, it's like everything is yes and no. We have to have enough people who can carry that amount, so that when the big blast hits, it's going to go out and affect everything equally, and it's going to go through the ley lines. It's going to go through all beings. It's really going to be fantastic. So, what else was I going to say? I had intended to originally talk about the financial system, because there's a different there's different geometry. There's new geometry going forward, and I'm definitely going to talk about that, but I think I may not do it right now. There's everything you put in is going to be expanded. In other words, if you imagine a tube, if you put one coin in, or an amount of love given, it's going to increase. It's going to increase. You're going to wind up as a, in the fifth dimension, it has to be this way, because we must receive, our giving and receiving must remain equal. Wait a minute, I'm going to have to rephrase that. Has to do with maintaining balance. Okay, I'm actually not going to talk about the financial system yet, but it's coming, and it's being upgraded enormously. So for a time, not down the road, but just for a time, we're going to be working with the monetary system, and there's a mechanism by which that's happening. So for a time, we're going to be working to affect the energy of money, working to affect, oh boy, I'm going to have to orchestrate this material differently. I know that what we plant is going to multiply. For example, if you imagine yourself as a tube, what you put out is going to have to go out on the energy of giving. This is what I was talking to Zoe about the other day. I'm not going to go too much into what she's making, but there are a lot of things that are going to be changing. And there's strata in the fifth dimension too. Like higher up in the fifth dimension, there are no more copyrights. There's no more personal ownership the same way. The desire to share is so strong that you can think of something, you're just the one who got it, who got the idea, but really you just want everyone to have it. The same way you wouldn't charge your child for feeding it. The whole idea of transaction really changes. Whatever you put into it is going to expand greatly, though. I really do want to make mention of that. So in the fifth dimension, when you're creating something, you are responsible not only for the creation itself, but for the effect it has on everything. And this is why you can't say, you don't no longer have the luxury of writing a book that's something like a horror novel. I mean, there is free choice. There's free choice, like in the fourth dimension. You can do that, but then you're responsible, not just for you. And like, I felt like making this, so I made this thing, and it's a horror novel. If it were your child, and you're responsible not just for, you no longer have the luxury of just being responsible for you when you have a child, you and your child. If your child does something, you're the adult, and you have to clean up the mess that kid made. Especially if it's not an actual child, and it's actually a book that you made. If you are responsible, if you write something like a horror novel, and you have now, and people don't know what it is before they read it, you need to think before you put certain things, certain images into mass consciousness, because that's going to tank the new realm very quickly. It won't be tolerated. So you have to think about what you're doing, because it will be your responsibility to clean it up. And I will tell you that from having been Joan of Arc. One of the reasons it was actually a act of love to go in and take on that job, because when you get everyone up and running and you say, everyone, we're going to go engage in this battle, that was my job, but I'm responsible for the cleanup. I didn't kill anybody in that lifetime, especially. I didn't kill anybody, even when I was in battle. But that doesn't mean that I'm not responsible for the effect it had. I'm still cleaning that up. And I'm telling you, my personal advice is be careful, be mindful. If all of humanity is now something that you steward as though it were a child that you loved, what do you actually want in your child's head? What do you want in your own head? Don't do it to someone else. You know how careful good parents are with the things that they allow near their kids? My younger daughter went home one time to her father's house, and the stepmother encouraged my 9-year-old to watch Silence of the Lambs. And drink Diet Coke. Can you imagine? I was absolutely horrified. And it was a massive trigger for me, because I know how much care I took to make sure that they never went to any of that crap. I wouldn't let them go into those Halloween stores, because there was so much violent imagery there. I took the previews out of their might have been a little bit of overkill, but I took the previews out of their Little Bear videos, because I didn't want them to see the Nickelodeon advertisements. Like I clipped them and scotch taped the videos together, repaired it, because I just didn't want their influences matter. Influences matter. So the rest of the population needs to matter to you, as though you were the wise steward. And there are sometimes, here's the thing, don't give the people what they want if they know less than you do. For real. I mean, in the fifth dimension, we're the ones who have the wisdom. There's a certain point where it can't be a democracy. I know that's really a kind of an unpopular thing to say, but like a democracy works when people are wise, and a democracy works when there's equality. But when there's a certain, and it's not like we're not going to have a democracy either, but there's a certain point where you do not, from a spiritual perspective, if you know something will take us south as a collective, don't let it happen. If everyone around you says, I know what let's do, let's all use Roundup. Some things should not be the matter of a vote. If you know that you are more spiritually mature and you know that the spiritual realm dictates the physical, do not give the keys to the car to the toddler. It's not a matter of, well, I made a decision and now you get to make a decision. That model doesn't work either. There are certain people who think that you can, that equality will be won by, like, I win one, you win one, and everything in a competitive mindset where everything is tallied. There's the misperception of equality, something like, well, you get something and I get something, and you already got something, so I get something now. I get to make a decision. You can't always let that happen. Because if one side is making a decision that will absolutely, you know for a fact, being the awakened one, my dog just lay in the electric cord. If you know for a fact that this person wants to take a road and like wants to go on the Titanic, it's your duty to make sure that doesn't happen. Don't let them I'm going to see if I can fix that. Sometimes you need to assume the role of parents too. And that is sometimes a little unpopular because we like the idea of free choice. But for the time being, in dealing with those in the fourth dimension, there is a bit like the awakened ones really do need to help the ones that are not awakened. That doesn't mean force our opinions. I'm going to fix this. Speaking of which, whoops. Okay, hang on. Every force evolves a form. That's just what I was talking about. Oh, come on, come on, come on. There's a short in this cord. Okay, don't touch it. Ah, don't touch it. He's wagging his tail and he's knocking the cord to the light. No, stay right there. Okay, just a minute. I'll feed you in a second. I'm almost done. That doesn't mean we inflict our opinions on them. That just means that we need to hold a field of resonance so that certain things cannot reoccur. You know, just because you're with a group of children, they say, but we want to watch Silence of the Lambs. It was a good movie. No, really, it was good. It might have been well crafted. I've seen it. I saw it a long time ago. And every once in a while, my guides will actually tell me to go back and watch something specific. And it's always for a specific reason. Like they told me to go watch Legion when and it really does have some dark and disturbing imagery. And I was shocked that that they told me to watch that but I did watch it. And I saw why they wanted me to watch it. It was actually very pertinent, and it did contain things that I needed to adjust. At any rate, I'm just saying that going forward, so these things are going to continue to exist for a while, but also in the fifth dimension. Oh, I will say that it's part of a much longer conversation, as I'm not going to say too much about it, because at some point I'm going to do a live stream that is just about the entertainment industry, the way it affects mass consciousness, and it doesn't work the way we have been led to believe. In the third dimension, there's an idea that and it's partially truth because it's true for them. Like you don't want, it's like sometimes there's a little bit of a feeling of arrogance sometimes where it feels like the higher up we go, we see the truth. And in fact, their truth is equally valid. It's there's a higher version of it. Like you build on, awareness builds. But in the third dimension, there is the idea that like the studios buy material based on what sells, or that the audience determines the material. And that's not strictly true at all. Because in the fourth dimension, there have been always, not right now, there are energetic forces that are directing. There are the actual directors. Because in the third dimension, you're limited to just merely responding to things. And they may think that the markets dictate it, but really the information is going being fed to them. We direct, in higher dimensions, we direct mass consciousness because we need to accelerate development. So we will put things in movies designed to do certain things, and it just doesn't work that way. Like in the third dimension, there's this idea that like people have secret meetings, like let's put this hidden information in this. And that's not the way it works. It doesn't work that way. You know, like all of that, all the stuff that shows up in movies like 9/11 in The Matrix, you know, like on his passport, I think, isn't his passport or something like that? It's not, it says 9/11. It's not like there are these secret meetings where, you know, like the scriptwriter and the directors, they all meet, like they have this secret knowledge and they're going to sneak it past the populace. That's kind of negotiation doesn't happen in the third dimension. They don't have that kind of responsibility in the third dimension. They have it in the higher dimensions. We put things in the energy streams and we put the elements where they're supposed to go. And so much of the time, it bypasses the awareness of the people who call themselves the creators, the people who, when they open to inspiration, a lot of them are as asleep as anyone else. Not all of them. There are some of them who are very awake and very aware of the influences that are coming in as they do it. But most of the time, the writers, the musicians, or what, they're not the ones that are you know, putting codes in, or that's not the way it works. That happens in higher dimensions, and it comes through the channelers, and it goes out and it turns out into a form that affects mass consciousness according to the way it was designed to. And a lot of that it's pre-planned, and very often what the creators thought they were making, or they're making something that they have their own idea of what's going on, but then there's a whole other level. And for like Disney movies, Frozen is a perfect example of that. Sometime I'm gonna go into that. At any rate, okay, I think we're just about done. I feel like I forgot to talk about something, but I'm sure I'll be back. Please go onto YouTube, because I think I'm going to do these on, I don't know, I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but please go onto YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Ascension Ark. If you're able to make a donation to Stephanie R. Kogarth via PayPal, stephanieRkogarth@gmail.com. My bank account has been, it was $4 2 days ago. I could really use some help. This is my only work. Anyway, onwards and upwards, gang. Today was a big day. All right. Anyone who private sessions are still available. I don't think I'm going to be doing them for very much longer at all. You can book one. Send me a private message if you'd like. I love you. I love you. I love you. I really, really, really do love you. Okay.